Okay, welcome to Windsong Month number 2. This is where it gets a little exciting. Month 1 was like, woo, one block cakewalk. This is where we kind of get into the meat of the quilt. The quilt is set up with a warm square and a cool square. So the warm squares are going to be in oranges and yellows, and the cool squares are going to be in creams and greens. So the first thing you want to do when you start cutting your pieces is set up the pieces for your moon block and set up your pieces for your sun block in 2 separate sections. Okay? Set up your moon block, set up your sun block. Do not try and do them at the same time. Do one first and then the other. Okay? Because some of the pieces, colors are shared in both blocks. Okay, so set up all the pieces you need for one, do one, set up all the pieces you need for the other, do the other. I'm going to go through, you're going to see me say, these are for the sun block, these are for the moon block, and I'm going to go through all the techniques that we need to put these blocks together. And we'll see how it goes. Now, the sun block and the moon block, they're 2 elements. We have the square in a square element, and we have an hourglass element. Okay, let me show you an hourglass. Now, the square in a square block, I'm going to review it. We did it last month. The hourglass, there are 2 ways to construct it. The instructions have you cutting 6-inch blocks, cutting those 6-inch blocks in quarters and sewing one piece to one piece to the other piece, and then sewing them together. Because you have opposite colors that are the same in this block, even if you have different colors here, I'm going to show you an alternate way of putting together the hourglass block so you don't have to deal with the biases when you cut those squares together. If your block cutting instructions say S and S, that is square in a square, cut those diagonals to make the triangle. If you have 6-inch squares that say HG, go ahead and leave those as squares until you see the end of this video. And then you can opt to do hourglasses the way I do them, or you can go ahead and cut them and follow the instructions, okay? No harm, no foul. So let's start with square in a square. You're going to be doing 4 different square in a square. So the standard square in a square, you are going to have a 3 3/8 inch square. You are going to have 3 1/4 inch triangle squares that you have cut in half into triangles. You're going to mark the centers of your square in a square. You're going to fold your triangles in half and lay them so the center pieces line up. You're going to sew on either side, press that open. Then you are going to mark the centers there. Lay out your triangles, sew them down, and then press them open. Okay? These are oversized, so you're either going to take your regular standard ruler to trim down. The way you trim with your standard ruler is you're going to find your 1/4 inch marking, and I'm going to line that up at the 2 1/4 and 2 1/4 mark in the center. I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch and the 1/4 inch there, and I'm going to line up this side on my 45-degree angle. Okay, so this is my standard Creative Grid 6.5 by 12.5 ruler. I have 3 reference points, the 1/4 inch here, the 1/4 inch here, and the diagonal. I'm going to flip that over, drop this into the 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch. I'm going to see that my 1/4 inch points are still there. that is along that diagonal, and I'm going to trim. Okay. So, warm square, fabric 9 and fabric 3, cool square, fabric 13 and fabric 5. Okay, we have 2 different square and squares now that we're doing. For the warm square, this side, we are going to take a fabric 8 center. We are going to put fabric 2 and fabric 4 on opposite sides, and then we're going to fill in with fabric 2s. So you're going to have 1 corner with fabric 4, 3 corners for fabric 2. And this one I'm going to show you trimming with my square and a square tool. I'm going to find my 4.5 by 4.5 square. I'm going to line up so that the horizontal and vertical dotted lines are touching the points of my square. I'm going to trim. Then I'm going to turn that around, drop that into the corner, quarter inch, and I'm going to trim. So I'm going to make 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, fabric 8, fabric 4, and fabric 2. This is for my sunblock. And for my moon block, I am doing these with fabric 7, fabric 2, and fabric 1. 1, 2, 3, I should have 1 more that I'm going to trim up. Okay, so, ta-da! 4 different square and a squares, and now we're going into our hourglass blocks. I think hourglass blocks are fun. I like doing them in a way that I mitigate the bias. So, this is for the sunblock. You are going to be using fabric number 2 and fabric number 9, fabric number 3 and fabric number 9. You are going to have 6-inch squares. You are going to make half square triangles with the 6-inch squares. Okay, so you're going to put the 6-inch squares on top of one another. You're going to mark the center, and you're going to sew a line a 1/4 inch away on either side of that center seam. And then you're going to cut them in half, and you're going to end up with 2 half square triangles with 3 and 9, and 2 half square triangles with 2 and 9. From here, you are going to line them up so that the darks are on opposite sides. You're going to lay one on top of the other. You're going to wiggle so that seam is butting against each other, so it's tight. You're going to mark your middle. You're going to sew a 1/4 inch away from either side. Is this better you can see? Mark the middle, sew 1/4 inch each side, okay? So this is exactly what this is, half square triangles, butted together. Now these are sewn, and when I cut this in half, we're going to get hourglasses. We're going to have not dealt with any bias, and this works because these two are the same even though these are different, okay? If they're 4 different pieces, they don't work, but if 2 are the same, this works. You're going to be making 4 of these for the sunblock. On the other side, you'll be making 4 of these, 5/1 and fabric 13s for the moon block. So once we have all our elements, which is the center square and a square, the corner square and a square, and the 4 hourglasses. Oops, where's my 4th? Where'd it go? I have so many of these hourglasses. Yep, let's trim one. When you trim an hourglass, we want to trim from the center, okay? So I like to use my square and a square ruler because I take the picot, I drop it on the center, I line up the diagonals. I don't have to worry about any other lines when I trim. If you have a standard ruler, you can trim to the 4.5 by 4.5, but you need to find the center, meaning you want to find your 2.25 by 2.25 mark. 2.25 by 2.25. Have that hit the center. Make sure you have diagonal lines set up, that your diagonal is going to hit here at 4.5 and 4.5, that this diagonal line is set up, and trim before dropping that into the 4.5-inch mark when you turn it around. That is why I really like this. I know exactly where my 4.5-inch is, and I know exactly where my center is. No muss, no fuss. Can always find it. Okay. If that is not an advertisement for this ruler, I don't know what is. So, center, square and a squares, hourglasses. Okay, so the moon block is done with the greens. The sun block is done with the yellows and oranges. This is going to be the center. You are going to put the light corners towards the inside. And on the hourglasses, you are going to put the light triangles on the outside. Okay, so this center becomes a square in another square in a star. You're going to then sew this together, and this together, and then your rows together to make your block. So that is your moon block. Your sun block, I'm going to make a little more room. Go. Here is your sun block. That is your square and a square. Just like this, your off-colored corner is to the middle. Oops. And you want your fabric 3s to the middle to complete this diamond in the center of your block. Oops, little corners. So we've got sun and we've got moon for month number 2. Put these on the side. Not too bad, right? Woohoo! Next month, more blocks. See you soon.